What is up, my brothers and sisters, my agents of respect? It's your boy Trey Johnson back with another episode of the No Disrespect But podcast. And sure, if you're watching today on January 12th, you guys have the news of who the new head coach at the University of Alabama is, Coach Kalen DeBoer. Um, and we're going to have plenty of time to talk about him, not so much on this episode, but in general, because this guy right here ain't going nowhere. Um, when I say I'm not going anywhere, it's in response to January 10th, 2023, a day that will live in infamy. Um, it's the day that the greatest college football coach of all time, Nicholas Lou Saban, retired from the game, retired as the head coach of the University of Alabama Crimson Tide, retired as a pioneer in this game, a guy that dominated in every era of college football, BCS, playoff, NIL, you name it. Championships, national championships won, conference championships won, top recruiting classes year in and year out. Tons of young men who went on to play the National Football League, others who were able to get their education and make great careers for themselves. Retiring a legacy is what it is. Now, it's crazy. I should have knew that Wednesday the 10th was going to be something, right? Woke up, wasn't really feeling that well, went to work, worked for a little bit. Um, Ended up heading out early, not too early, but just earlier than I usually do. And as I'm kind of getting everything ready, I know the doctor misses on her way home. I get the alert. And keep in mind, I have already been surprised during the day because I hear that longtime head coach of the Seattle Seahawks, Pete Carroll, is no longer with the team. And so I'm trying to wrap my head around that. I'm trying to wrap my head around how the Saints are continuing this quest of continuity. And I haven't heard of them firing any coaches yet, talking about bringing in John Gruden. And again, already feeling bad. And I get the alert that Nick Saban is retiring. And guys, I'm telling you, I tried to fact check everything because I was like, no, you guys are messing with me. Like, I just heard Coach last week, not even a week ago, on the Pat McAfee show saying that he feels good. He doesn't know why people keep saying he's going to retire. Maybe it's because he's getting old. That's his words. But it's like, Coach is going to be back, right? Like, this is fake. And look, I get it. He's 72 years old, going to be 73 years old this year. And so I kind of figured the end was coming. I think any Alabama fan could tell you that they kind of figured the end was coming. And reason being is over at least the last couple years, we've kind of been talking about, okay, who will the replacement for Coach Saban be? Do you go get a Kirby Smart? Do you convince him to come back? Do you convince Sark to leave Texas and come? What about Lane Kiffin? Do you convince him to leave Ole Miss? So those were some of the Dan Lanning at Oregon, a guy that Coach Saban was really fond of. So we started having these conversations, right? And when you start to have those conversations, that's when you kind of are close to knowing that it's almost time. Um, Went through the same thing before Coach K retired. I remember one of his big time assistants ends up taking a head coach job at Pittsburgh. And it's like, oh, who's going to be the guy to replace Coach K? And then a few years later, Coach K says he's retiring. John Schneider's going to replace him. And there's that. And with my Spurs, you're starting to hear some conversations about, okay, who's going to be replacing Coach Popovich? So you know the time is coming once we start trying to wrap our minds around that this person, this giant this this pioneering the game won't be here long, and you need to start thinking about who can fill those shoes or begin to attempt to fill those shoes. And so when those conversations started to happen, you kind of, if you really were honest with yourself, you knew it was coming at some point. But I think many Alabama fans will agree with me when saying this past Wednesday, we were not ready. We were not ready. I'm glad that Coach Saban was ready. I think the athletic department at Alabama was ready, and athletic director Greg Byrne was ready, given that in less than 48 hours, you have your new head coach, right? But it was hard. I mean, I've been a Bama fan for 20 years, so obviously before the Saban era really got started, but towards the tail end of what one would call the dark days at University of Alabama. And so Coach Saban, who I was familiar with growing up in Louisiana, I knew his time at LSU. I knew of the national championship team. My family, they were big fans of Skylar Green because he had grew up right down the road, going to LW Higgins. So to see him winning national championship was big in my part of town. And um, so I was familiar with Coach Saban. I knew of his time with the Miami Dolphins as head coach. The years with Ricky Williams and Ricky Williams getting suspended with the weed, and then him not being able to get Drew Brees. The Saints were able to do that, and then kind of buy him out. And next thing you know, he's the head coach of Alabama. And so, given that I was 3 years in, essentially to Alabama fandom, still, you know, a kid. Um, just getting into being a teenager, so just really starting to grasp um, what the game of football and college football specifically meant, learning about the rivalries and the traditions and things like that that you don't really care about or really think about when you are, 9 years old, just figuring out the game. And the only reason why you like the team is because the quarterback has a cool name. But you start to um, learn a little bit more about the team because you actually like him. And so Coach Saban coming in was still fairly in the beginning stages of me learning the game and what it truly meant. And so if Coach was in front of me, and if he just so happened to watch this video, I mean, what I would really like to say is thank you. Um, when you're that young, and again, not just learning the game of college football, but learning how to be a young man, learning um, how to operate through life, being an athlete yourself, and trying to figure out, okay, how do I work to get better? Couldn't have had a better role model, so to speak, than being able to watch Coach Saban from afar, and being able to watch how he conducted himself with not just supreme confidence, but a go get it attitude, a guy that had that hunger to be the very best and to get the best out of you and was never afraid to tell you if you weren't giving your best and what was demanded of you and what was the way to get there. That greatness isn't just something you wake up with. You have to work for it. You have to put forth the effort to do the things that greatness does and that greatness demands. And if you can't support that lifestyle, if you can't support that way and that mentality, then you'll never be great. And he always made sure to point out that it's okay that you're not great. Everybody's not great. Only a few people in this world can say that they are great, that they chase greatness every day. And so, Coach Saban, thank you for being someone who chased greatness every day and presented himself as such and became a prime example for bystanders essentially like me, but also the young men and women that came across you as your time as a coach. I mean, we know the players that have gone on to be successful, the those that graduated that may not have gone to the professional leagues, but were successful in their respective careers. We know of the head coaches that worked under him um, that are doing great things. We know how extensive and long that coaching tree is, and so thank you for that. Thank you for setting that standard of excellence. Thank you for showing that despite the winning and the grind, that the most important thing in this world to you was Miss Terry and your children and eventually your grandchildren. So that family was the main thing. It started that way and it ended that way for you. And so again, just being a bystander and a fan from afar, growing up in Louisiana, miles away from Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Uh, just thank you for being you. And so I know it's kind of a downer, guys, and I'm sorry, but it's a real emotional time for me. Again, for the most part, Coach Saban is the only coach I've known in the time where I actually started to pay attention to the coaches and the players and everything that goes with an athletic program. But started off as a moment of shock. Um, and then you start to replay the memories, right? You start to replay what were some of the greatest moments as a fan, just experiencing the Nick Saban era at Alabama. And there's so many for me. There's so many for me. I wrote down three, but I mean, I could have written down 3,000. I swear to God. But for show purposes and sake of time, I wrote down three. And in no particular order, the national championship against Notre Dame in I think it was 2012, 2013. It was us winning back to back. I do know that. So it was the year after we beat LSU in a national championship. So it would have been the game would have been in 2013. But um, this hoodie I'm wearing was a result of that. I was visiting my dad who stays in the Northeast, um, and he's a big Notre Dame fan. And as we were approaching the national championship, he and I made a bet. And I said if the Irish won, that I would buy him a hoodie. And that if Alabama won, he had to buy me a hoodie. And so we know how that game went. I remember the look on his face when Alabama did damage and really took apart a undefeated Notre Dame team led by Manti Te'o on the defensive end. Uh, Hell of a player. We know what was going on during that time, and so we won't belabor that. But um, it was a good team, coached by Coach Brian Kelly, who's now at LSU. And so Coach Saban having a chance to win his second national championship with Alabama, I believe it was. And so quarterback AJ McCarron, he was my guy. Everybody that knows me knows that I still call him the GOAT because he was the guy for me at the quarterback position that I really used to base everybody else off, to be quite honest with you. And so seeing him be able to dominate, seeing Eddie Lacy be able to dominate with that patented spin move. Our defense just was on a tear that night. And again, I got this hoodie that I'm wearing out of that. And so um, every game day since then, I used to wear it, but probably for the last maybe um, 7 or 8 years, I build what my wife would call a shrine, where I have my hats and my hoodies, and I lay them on the couch, and I sit in the middle with my Bama hat on, and I watch the game. And so, uh, but this one was the merchandise that started it all for me. And so, and I wouldn't have it if not for that game. Or I probably would have got it eventually, obviously, but it means a lot to me because of one, a national title came out of this. Um, I beat my dad in something, so a lot of memories that come with that. Um, Another one was the game-winning drive versus LSU in 2012. Obviously, LSU wanted their redemption for their loss in the national championship game earlier that year, and so it was a big game. I remember I was in college; it was my first semester in college, and I was home. I remember that when I would go home, I would go with my uncle's house because my mom was probably working. My grandmother was probably out building houses or something like that, whatever she felt like doing in the free time. So I would always, get up, go with my uncle who was kind of in the front of our subdivision. I lived in the back of our subdivision. He lived in the front. So I'd go over there, hang out with him all the time. We talk sports, that type of thing. So I remember I went over there and we were watching this game. And at one point it didn't look pretty for the Alabama Crimson Tide. And if you are an Alabama Crimson Tide fan in the state of Louisiana, it can get crazy, especially when Alabama loses. They will let you know for the rest of the year that, especially since Nick Saban became the head coach, that, hey, we beat y'all and you got to sit on that. And I know all too well 2 years ago I had to deal with it, but luckily, uh, or a year ago I had to deal with it, and luckily, I didn't have to deal with it this year. But um, the Tigers go up 17-14, and for one reason or another, I really had no idea why they did this, but kind of did it like it was like a pooch kick, and it ended up going out of bounds. So Alabama got really good field position and only needed 3 points. And AJ McCarron, a guy that everybody wants to call the game manager, and that was kind of the big thing. And you always people use that connotation as a negative of this guy gets carried by a great defense and a running game. And that was the time where he had to step up. He had to step up. The game was on his arm. And we weren't going to win if he didn't come to play. And he hits Kevin Norwood on a few passes. And then, LSU, they're getting desperate. They're like, look, we got to get a sack. We got to knock Alabama out of field goal range. And look, back in those times before the Will Riker era, it was like pulling teeth trying to watch Alabama kick field goals. So had you forced Alabama to kick a long field goal, you were probably going to win that game. And LSU was thinking, hey, we are going to win this goddamn game. And to do that, we got to get pressure on A.J. McCarron. And what do you know? We run a screenplay to T.J. Yeldon. And I remember being in my uncle's living room, and T.J. catches that ball, and he's running, and he makes a move, and it's him in the end zone. And I jump out. I jump off of the couch in the air. You would have swore for God I was on the field with TJ running into the end zone. And I just remember running around my uncle's house screaming, roll tide, roll tide, roll tide, roll. And again, I'm a Louisiana kid who's an Alabama fan, so I talk my crap to my friends who couldn't wait to get on me if LSU would have been able to hold on to that lead and win that game, and not only stick it to Alabama but stick it to Coach Saban one more time. And I was just ecstatic. I can't even explain really the emotion that went with that because it was just so much. And I'll take a break for a second in that it never mattered who the quarterback was. It never mattered what the situation was. You always felt truly like you had a chance. And I mean, maybe it was the Coach Saban presence, but if Alabama was within a shooting distance, within distance of making a play that won in the game, you just always had that belief that they could and would make that play, or at the very least get pretty damn close to trying. And so that was a big moment for me, one of my top moments. And the last one I listed was the 2018 SEC championship. Look, I know there are a lot of memories. There are a lot of title games. Everybody is saying, "Hey Trey, what about second and 26?" Like you had to be going crazy. I was during that moment, but I will say this: Coach Saban always seemed godlike. Like it was just him and everybody else, and he was just this presence of excellence, and just nothing shook him. And I think the 2018 SEC championship was the first time I saw Coach Saban, or saw him as a human, someone who did feel things, someone uh, who did get hurt or was upset with the whole Jalen versus Tua story and what's going on with Jalen and how is Coach Saban treating Jalen amidst now Tua being the guy. And in that moment, Tua gets hurt, Jalen comes in, scores 14 unanswered, wins us the game pretty much on a walk-off touchdown, essentially. I mean, Georgia got the ball back and he stopped them, but that touchdown was the dagger. And post-game, Coach Saban was just talking about how much he loves Jalen and how proud of him he was. And, for me, I was like, oh my God, he is human. He actually has emotions other than on go. And that's not to say he didn't love other players. There were probably moments that he showed it that I just never really looked at. But in that moment, and maybe because I was invested as a fan in that storyline and invested in Jalen's story as a guy who, true freshman, comes in, takes the job, leads us to a national championship. Um, Honestly, one stop away from winning the game. Then comes back his sophomore year and does it again. We hit some adversity, losing to Auburn, but still manages to win the SEC championship game, wins the semifinal, gets us to a national championship again versus UGA, and all of a sudden we're not doing well, and he gets benched. He gets benched for a true freshman in Tua. So it's like, hey, this guy that for 2 years has been our fearless leader, what's going on? And we know the rest. Tua ends up getting the starting job. Jalen stays on, could have transferred, doesn't, stays on the whole season. And he comes in that moment and he delivers. And you could see the passion and the love in Coach Saban's eyes. And man, that's an amazing moment for me as a fan, because it's always talk about how the coaches use the players and they only want them to get the glory and to get the fame. But if you've ever questioned if Nick Saban cared about his players, I think everything got answered in that moment. How he felt about that player for that season, and specifically after that moment. Um, it's something that I'm sure Coach Saban wouldn't forget. I'm sure if you ask Jalen, he'll never forget that. And I know me as a fan watching that moment. I was in Georgia of all places at that time. Um, I know that I will never forget that moment. Um, so where do we go from now? Where do we go from here? Um, as I told you, Coach Kalen DeBoer, former coach at University of Washington, was national champion runner-up this past year. He's going to be the guy in charge. And look, no disrespect, but there will never be another like the GOAT. There will never be another like Nick Saban. 9 SEC championships, 10 division titles in the SEC West, 6 national championships, 4 Heisman winners, including Alabama's first Heisman winner in Mark Ingram, and just 16 years of great memories, right? Like, or seven, well, I don't know if my math wrong, but 16, 17 years of great memories. And I'm gonna get to coach the board sometime in the spring when we start spring ball. And like I said, there'll never be another GOAT. There'll never be another Nick Saban. But that's okay. If it was easy for someone else to be him, he wouldn't be as great. He wouldn't be who he is. And so, wish you a happy retirement, coach. Wish you a happy retirement, Miss Terry. Um, Play as much golf as you want. Spend time with the grandbabies and the kids. I know they mean a great deal to you. Um, don't forget about us little people. Um, I know you're going to be watching down from BDS Stadium. They got an office in there for you, but um, Coach will be missed. And like I said, it's not about the wins and losses. It's not as if in the 16 years he coached, we got 16 national titles. So we understand that every year can't be the year we host the trophy. But what I do hope going forward is that we honor the legacy and the tradition of not just what Coach Saban started, but for what the University of Alabama is and has been for quite some time. Are we doing things the right way? Are we doing things the best way to support the players and the coaches? Are we maximizing or are we teaching the skills and the lessons to maximize opportunity, whether that's you playing at the next level, whether that's you succeeding at the next level of being an adult in the workforce, whether that's being a successful student, a graduate of the University of Alabama, or for those that transfer, are we still having lessons instilled that wherever they go, they know to be the best that they can be, and they strive for that. That's what Nick Saban will be remembered for the most. His impact, his ability to get the best out of you, and more so maybe his ability to give you the best of him until he couldn't give you his best anymore. Not going to end the show the way I typically end because who gives a damn if anybody got offended? There's nothing you can teach me. There's nothing I can learn right now. And so, with that being said, I just want to end the show saying again, love you, Coach Saban. Going to miss you. It's going to be weird not seeing you on those sidelines. I don't think it'll ever get easier. Even if another 17 years pass, I don't think it'll ever be easier not seeing you on the sideline. But happy to have experienced that and to have been able to watch the success and as a fan, be able to join in on the success. Thank you. Love you. Roll Tide.